We began the hour with a top Republican, Matt Gaetz. Now we turn to a top Biden official. Pete Buttigieg is here as there is growing noise about a clash over a potential government shutdown and President Biden giving what the White House is billing as a key and important new speech about the economy and what they're calling Bidenomics. It is actually an echo of something that ultimately worked out for his two-term other Democratic president and how they embraced Obamacare.
Everything that you are seeing with our economy being stronger is because of Bidenomics.
13 million jobs, that's a record since the president got here.
We've recovered all the jobs lost during the pandemic. We've added 1 million more new jobs.
America's economy is strong and experiencing stable and steady growth.
That is the argument. You've probably heard it, but there is signs that there is a rough reception. Some outlets noting voters do not actually see President Biden as the source of a lot of the economic progress that has been slowly made since the pandemic. As billed tonight, we are pleased to announce that Transportation Secretary, former presidential candidate, Biden official Pete Buttigieg joins us tonight from the White House. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me on. Good to be with you.
Good to have you. Let's start with that point. What is Bidenomics? Is it working? And if it is working, why isn't the president getting credit?
Well, Bidenomics is a policy that puts the American people first, that talks about and focuses on building the economy, as the president often says, from the middle up, middle out, and the bottom up, not the top down. And in very practical terms, what we have seen is an agenda of investing in America, of making sure that workers benefit, and of promoting competition so that we have the kind of market economy that is actually on fairer terms than the past. And I think it's really important as we look at the extraordinary growth that we're seeing, the low unemployment that we're seeing, that we do get the message out that connects the dots, that this didn't just happen on its own. Remember, a year ago, there was almost universal consensus among commentators that we were destined for a recession by 2023. The reverse has happened. Unemployment has not been this low for this long since before I was born. And we need to make sure that the word is out there.
Well,
that,
sir, respectfully,
that's largely because of the investments.
Respectfully, you are young. You are young, though.
Fair enough, but even at my tender age, to go more than 40 years since the last time we've seen this kind of economic growth and job creation, that says something. And I think it says something in particular that vindicates the president's belief that things like investing in America's productive capacity was a good idea. The infrastructure bill that we're at work every day delivering on, that I'm seeing the results of. Most recently, I was in South Dakota. We're working on a stretch of I-90 there and also benefiting rural communities. I was in Chamberlain, South Dakota. Their airport terminal there in that small town, it was a mobile home. We're funding that to become a building. So whether it's a place like Chamberlain, South Dakota, or a place like LAX, we're making investments that are creating the jobs and sustaining the supply chains that are going to position us for long-term economic growth like what we're seeing right now. And no, the credit for that doesn't come automatically. That's why we've got to be out there reminding people that there is a relationship between that hard-fought legislation and the growth we're seeing today.
Understood. You mentioned your portfolio. Obviously, transportation is a huge part of our economy. Then there's all these clashes over labor rights, which you're well aware of. I want to play for you what the auto workers labor leader is saying. Take a listen.
What's good for the CEOs is good for the members. Our members help generate those massive profits, the $250 billion in profits they've recognized in the last decade. The CEOs gave themselves a 40% pay increase over the last 4 years. Our members deserve a hell of a lot better than where they are.
Seems like an understandable piece of advocacy there. They're looking at a possible strike deadline tomorrow. This is an issue, as you know, that affects a lot of folks and then everyone else also looking at the same pay disparities. The question is pretty simple. What are you and this administration doing about this?
Well, what we're doing is we're urging the parties to stay at the table, work 24/7 to negotiate a win-win solution that works for workers. I mean, what you just heard the UAW president say, I think is basically asking to make sure that what has clearly worked for the companies, what has worked for their shareholders and their CEOs also benefits workers. And I take this pretty personally, coming from a community, South Bend, Indiana, that's home to UAW Local 5 and UAW Local 9, where I saw how the entire middle class of of that community was built on the good-paying nature of auto jobs. We see a lot of growth in manufacturing, and it's very important to make sure that workers benefit from that. Now, obviously, it's the parties that are negotiating. The government officials are not at the table during those conversations, but what we are doing is urging the parties to get to that agreement that's going to make sense for workers and build that next generation of middle-class jobs.
Yeah. And writ large, I have about 1 minute left just to give you that notice. Is this growing pay disparity across all industries, not just your portfolio of transportation, is this a problem in America, or do you view this as something that is worked out in the markets and by businesses?
Well, one thing we have seen is the power of the labor movement, something the president believes strongly in, has been leading to good outcomes for workers. You look at the West Coast ports negotiations that recently wrapped up. You look at the deal that UPS Teamsters workers got, and they're doing well. Rail workers, who a year ago, almost none of them had access to sick leave. Now the majority of them do. We're pushing for them to get to 100%. So we can see that business can succeed and thrive while workers do better. That's, of course, what the labor union is all about, and that's a big part of what Bidenomics is all about. Now, the last thing I'll mention is alongside making sure workers get paid better, we also need to make sure that costs come down. That's why we've been so committed to things like the $35 cap on insulin and other measures that are going to keep costs under control. It remains a huge priority for us, and I think what you're going to see is a real contrast in priorities between our administration that continues to focus on raising pay and lowering costs for workers and middle-class families, and what we're seeing from the other side that is about cutting taxes for corporations and the wealthy. And it's just a deeply misplaced priority, especially at a time like this in the American economy.
Yeah, understood. And at a busy time, I appreciate you joining us, Secretary Buttigieg.
Thank you. Appreciate being with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.